Hello, and welcome to the Frictionless Experience, the podcast where we lay waste to digital friction. I'm Chuck Moxley.
And I'm Nick Palladino.
And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to uncover the stories lying inside of your data and how you can improve digital experiences through personalization and testing. Joining us is an expert on this topic, Jared Miller. Jared is the Senior Director of Web Analytics and Personalization at Kendra Scott, and he brings more than 15 years experience in e-commerce and analytics for leading retailers, including Gap, Old Navy, Banana Republic, Pandora, Rue 21, and GNC. Jared, welcome to the Frictionless Experience.
Thank you, Chuck. Nick, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, we're glad you're able to join us today. So Jared, give us some idea of what you and your team at Kendra Scott have been focused on since you joined the company in May of last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kendra Scott, like a lot of other retailers, got to COVID and got to the pandemic and realized that, hey, there's something to this e-commerce thing, right? So maybe we should put a little bit more focus on this. And we've been doing that as a company to amazing results. And they hired my boss, KK Kaminashish Kundu, and he organized the team into three lanes, right? We have our product and UX, we have our digital merch, and then we have our team, the newest team, the analytics and personalization. And when I came in, I started as a contractor, and then I went to full-time. I think a lot of people start with data or the quality of data or reporting. We didn't do that. We wanted to drive an impact, and we wanted to do it very quickly. And so and we can get in more of how we did that, but the lanes that are under me, the focus are several lanes. There's your traditional web analytics, right? How do we collect the data that we want to have on the experience, right? How do we present that either within the UI of our tools or get that into some of our other data tools? I distinguish that from e-commerce analytics, right? The data storytelling. Why is e-commerce what it is? And can we find value and opportunity in this data, right? So that's a big focus. And then we have testing. And over this summer, we put up a robust testing program. And then personalization. We've just put down what we think our roadmap's going to be and how we're going to drive value through that. We're starting to test into that and ideate into that through data. And digital surveys would fall under me as well.
So got it. And so when you think about data and analytics, how do you drive value from that data then to improve the user experience? Because you talked about a lot of different kinds of data. How does that relate back to help you drive that user experience?
Yeah, we really use it in the sense of data-driven ideation, right? So what we want to do as analysts is use data to look for opportunities or unknown sources, currently unknown or underutilized sources of value. So one of the things that I like to do with my team is, and I think that this captures the broader sense in kind of a specific way, is that we as analysts, we want to be more than just report writers or more than just people to collect data or think about how the data is presented in the tool. We want to be more than a cost center. So we want to actually use the data to bring incrementality and incremental revenue to the business. And so how do we do that? And the way that we do that is everybody on the team is goaled to bring a certain amount of incremental revenue annually through data and evangelizing that data and hypothesizing from it and then testing and proving value. And so in the way that works is, I take off the senior director hat, the managers take off the manager hats, and at some point we're all just analysts and we all have a target to hit on the incremental value. And so what we do is it's almost like a production conveyor belt. Can we find an insight? And then we do a lot of training and a lot of enrichment around how do you tell a data story, right? What are some of the leaders in the field doing? Can we adopt some of that? Can we learn from them? In some cases, we bring them in to train us, right? And so can we start to take what we found in the data and take the insight and publicize that? And we do trainings around what verb do you use to communicate an insight? What is an insight? Where do you put it on the slide? And then we start to use that through good storytelling techniques to evangelize the data and evangelize the insight. and then hopefully get it into testing queue and test it and prove whether this can drive incremental value for us.
I love thinking about data in the sense of a storytelling, because that's where things come to life, right? Understanding what the numbers say and realizing what your customers are doing to create those numbers are two fundamentally different things. So you're creating that story, figuring out what that means as an analyst, and being able to retell that story to be able to then say, hey, this is why this is important, because my customers tell me it's important. So building that story and understanding those customer frustrations are, super important.
Absolutely. And I think that's so well said. Where is the customer frustration? And, ultimately we're trying to connect our offerings to their needs and desires. What's preventing that? Can we use data to tell that story?
Well, and it's such a radical. I mean, the fact that you said that everybody in the team is gold toward to drive a certain amount of incremental revenue is like crazy to think about, because these people probably are not, many of them are used to being kind of back office and think, how am I going to drive revenue? Give us an example. Can you tell us a story or give us an example of where somebody on the team actually looked at the data, discovered this, brought the story forward, you made the improvement, and actually were able to measure that incremental revenue?
Yeah, there's lots and lots of them, and for privacy, I'll focus on one that I did. Although I will say, I try to focus on good hiring, and I have met some amazing analysts and storytellers in my day, and usually a little bit of coaching, and they produce things far better than what I produce, and that's where we want to be, right? Because then we are producing literally as a team. But I will give my example just because it's closer to the heart. But when I came to Kendra Scott, one of the things that we want to drive is insider signups. We care about our customers, we care about our best customers, and we want to know something about them, right? And we want to celebrate them. And so we looked at our insider sign up page, and did some analysis. We used Content Square, we used Google Analytics, right? Just very basic data collection and storytelling tools that are fundamental to our field. And we found that some of our primary calls to action were not necessarily highlighted where they should have been. We found that there was friction in terms of how many steps to actually not just see the call to action, but actually be able to sign up for what we wanted you to do to improve your experience. And so, we explored different ways that we could test this. And, without giving too many results, it was, we ended up running a monotate dynamic experience, and it was statistically significant. The lift that from what we had hypothesized from the data, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z to get these calls to action, where they are more likely to be seen and present them in a way that's more digestible, we can remove some steps to completing the task. That turned out, that ideation, that hypothesis from the data turned out to be completely accurate. And we did see a statistically significant revenue per visit lift, and also an increase in everything from clicks to signups for the program. And that benefited e-com and it benefited retail.
One of the things that I feel like is often overlooked is that just simply the number of steps it takes to complete a journey. Understanding how many steps it takes and where you can actually start optimizing that to narrow in steps. And it can be something as simple as like, hey, your checkout flow right now is give me your address, then give me your payment, then review it and confirm. You can do that all in one page. That one page is going to convert significantly better than having an experience that steps through each one. And so that fundamental difference, and maybe that's not true for literally every brand, but when you have that simplification of the number of overall steps, that's simplifying the user's experience and the way they think about your brand. It's a simple brand. It's easier. It's the Amazon experience, right? That's what everybody wants. You want that one click and ready to go. And obviously a lot of that Amazon experience comes from loyalty that you kind of build up over time. So you have to build up that loyalty. But how do you do that in the first place? You reduce the steps that it takes to complete your journey. So it's this cycle of endless opportunity that also is obviously a big challenge that data analysts are really at the tip of the spear of.
Yeah, and I like what you said about endless opportunity. I put a lot of work into it. The last few teams that I've led, I use the word process loosely, right? I mean, a process is a model of reality, so we can't possibly model every outcome. So if you follow the process religiously, you're guaranteed failure, right? Because it can't model everything. So I use process lightly, but I did come up with some processes to ensure that how do we as an analytics team come together to regularly produce value, to regularly look at the data, evangelize it, hypothesize, and try to get it tested. And Chuck, you were asking about some of the wins, and I gave you a pretty simple example, but some of the best ones weren't mine. Some of the best ones were people on the team. And I think that there's really something to be said for you take somebody with the right personality, a little bit of understanding, and a great analytical mind, and teach a little bit of storytelling. And we as a team were raising up and we're regularly producing all these things that are of tangible value. There is an HR standpoint to it too, though. Like you said, Chuck, a lot of this are frequently we're used to could be back office types, right? Working on Jira queues or something, and that's not the way that I would traditionally run this sort of team. So we have to be careful that we don't put the pressure on too much, and that when we think about like annual reviews and things as to how this goal translates, because some people it can be a little bit worrisome for them.
I can imagine. So, what do you think, Jared, that other teams are missing when it comes to learning from these digital experience analytics?
I don't know that I can say so much because I think there's so many brilliant people out there, and there's so many different ways that you could approach these programs, right? So I don't know that I want to say anybody's missing anything, but rather that we do have a method that works, right? And for us, it's about simplicity. It's essentially time boxing. Who does what and when do we do it, to make sure that we don't get lost in the day-to-day grind as analysts, and we still produce real insights, not just reports or data or responding to requests, but that we proactively bring forward an idea from the data and we proactively drive value. And that works for us, right? And it works really well, and it's worked the other places that I've been. So one thing I do think as an industry, though, we have to be careful. I think it depends on where the company is on the maturity curve. We so frequently get caught up in technology or data, when the reality is we don't need that much data to make good decisions and have good insights. I'm not even convinced that the data has to be perfect. So is this the wow moment? I don't know, right? I don't think you need perfect data for these things. And I think if you're leading the discussion with your technology or your platform or the data, I think that's a miss, right? And we should be leading with the customer, right? And leading with a story, right? And hypothesizing. Although at some point, I think the data does become, for a very mature company, right? The data probably takes on a lot more, becomes a lot more pertinent because they may have covered all that ground with that little bit of data, right? We are starting down that journey.
When you say it doesn't have to be perfect, what do you mean? Do you mean it just has to be directionally accurate, or you don't have to know every nth element or all the data? You just have to have enough to kind of. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I guess it's more about not letting perfection get in the way of process, or not letting perfection get in the way of progress, if I want to say that correctly. Um, I think we can spend so much time trying to make the data better and make the data perfect that it can distract from actually coming up with an insight and a value driver from the data. And my career in analytics has been about trying to find a way to how do you get a little bit above, just a little bit above the daily grind, so that you can do the interesting things, right? And I think if you re-immerse yourself in constantly trying to improve the data, there's a time and a place to do it, but I think it has to be kept in check. So I think it's more about realizing when you have enough to ideate an experience, to create an experience that can drive value today, and then down the road we may say, hey, we need something else for this one.
Yeah, so something that reminds me of is just the concept of lean economics. Trim the bottom 10% to improve the median. So as long as your data is accurately understanding what that bell curve is, so that you can identify what your bottom 10% is, or at least bottom 5%, whatever it may be, how do I then attack that, be able to trim that off, and then I'm going to be able to improve my median that way. So that's part of the way that I think about data too. And another thing that you kind of mentioned is just that little bit of success, that little bit of improvement. There's a classic customer success mentality that's all about making sure that every single week you're just doing 1%. That's it. That's all you need to do is just 1%. Because as you do 1% every week, that's going to end up festering and becoming a very large net improvement over the course of several weeks, years, months, whatever it is. And that's where a lot of this comes from. And so making sure that your data just is able to represent that population in an accurate way. I like the way you're thinking about this.
It's so well said, too. I always say we put one foot in front of the other. As long as we are making progress, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can take things in phases. We can take the hurdles as we get them, but we have to remember to drive value today, and that is our personalization strategy for next year. We have invested in the tools. We have a fair amount of data. We do need to put some percentage of time towards the data and the platform, but most of that's going to be towards using the data to ideate good experiences and validate those, and hopefully we can keep those experiences running to drive value and not just value to us, but to our customers, right? And connect them with what it is that they're looking for.
How do you see using personalization to improve or remove friction from that digital experience? What are some of your hypotheses going into that this year?
For me, it's about that it gives us a vessel to do a couple of things. We have our customers and their desires and what they're looking for. They leave some data trace behind. We have some tools, right? We have Monotate, Content Square, right? We have, CDP. We have all these things, right? And we have a lot of internal expertise. How do we bring those together, right? And how do we statistically validate some of this? How do you balance rigor with expert opinion, with getting to an outcome that is what the customer needs, right? And so, I think if we step back, what we focused on first was building a testing program that did just that, right? That gave us lanes. There are some times when we're going to validate an idea when we want to be locked down. We're going to do some sizing. Is this really worth going after? We're going to do some statistical power testing. How long do we run this? We might need our UX team to look at it. Might need developers. We might need our IT team to validate. Are we using an algorithm in a correct and legal and ethical way? Right. That's a lot of red tape. Right. So we also have other things where it's predetermined. Hey, notify us and go. Right, we can just test, right, and so part of our program has been trying to find that balance between when you have a very locked down protocol and when can you move quickly, which allows us to both have very quality experiences and quality ideas, and when we're able to go a little bit faster, and that allows us to blend statistics with data, with customer experience, with internal expert opinion, which sets us up to be able to personalize, right, which is kind of the next step. So. And what we're putting together right now is instilling that good data foundation of getting from data to hypothesis, put that into the testing program. Hopefully some of those pan out and it can become what is more traditional personalization. And I will say, and we say this with humility, but we're a Monotate customer. I've used Monotate everywhere that I've been. They gave us their 2023 Program Champion Award, right, to recognize the program we put together and the ability to execute for our customers to not just test, but to personalize and put together an experience for them. And it's really been it's been the time's gone quick, and it's been a great ride, and we're honored to have gotten that.
Yeah, personalization is something that's really cool because it actually allows you to distract from a lot of the core friction that might exist, because users might then get engulfed in the fact that if you have a well-targeted personalization strategy, they like it so much that it's for them, that they're a little bit more patient with some of those other aspects. So it can actually organically improve your entire website just because that personalization has targeted your user so well. And that's going to give that organic feeling, because really when we start talking about it, friction is about the subconscious. It's not about the conscious. If somebody's actually thinking about the website as a function of saying, hey, this thing's slow or this thing doesn't work right or anything like that, that's all only negative. That's the conscious. We don't want that. When it's good, frictionless experience, that is subconscious, and we need to make sure they're focusing on the personalization and forgetting about the lack of or I guess I should say a frictionful experience, if it exists. Right? It's all about getting that subconscious and building up that subconscious.
Yeah, and we think we're slowly moving there. I mean, I think we're honest about where we started and where we're at and where we're going. But we made tremendous progress, and there'll be a lot more progress over the next year or so with the roadmap that we put together and the experiences and groups that we want to target. And so, you know, um, I think once again you always hit the nail on the head, Nick, and said it so well. But yeah.
So, and you've touched a little bit on this about this A/B testing and how you're testing various features to improve or remove some sort of friction in the user experience. Can you talk a little bit more about your approach to testing and validation, and then maybe give us some examples, and maybe not even from Kendra Scott, but maybe from when you're at Gap or somewhere else, where you were able to see some big wins from testing something that was kind of unexpected, where you made one tweak or did an A/B test on something and it was like a big unlock, and you were like, "Wow, holy cow, yeah, it was millions," or whatever. Is there an example you could give us on that?
There are several. I'm trying to think of what the most appropriate one would be. And it's worth mentioning that testing falls under me at Kendra Scott. It fell under me at Pandora and previous to that. But at Gap, testing was not under me. We were a net user of the testing program. The team there was really focused on ideation, right, and generating ideas from data, which was really cool, right? It was really narrow but really intense. Um, so there were. I'm trying to think of the best way to say some of these. We I won't go into too much detail, but at one of the retailers I was at, there was some research that we did on a certain behavior happening in the cart. And there was a certain feature in the cart that wasn't really used. It was like less than 10% of users used it, right? And even before you apply statistics, right, the argument is, oh, well, if you can get them to use it, oh my gosh, they're more likely to come back or check out or whatever it is. And you say, well, that's a selection bias, right? That this is about the people. But I think there's an alternative there before we even dive deeper is that, well, 90% don't, right? I can try something to get more people over the line and drive value today, right? And this was one of the use cases where I'm thinking of somebody who reported to me who means a lot to me, who was very good at what this person did. And this person initially was not very good at slideware, and we worked together, and this person's slides ended up being better than mine by far, right? I mean, this is where there's this net learning and nonlinear gains in the team, right? I mean, this person put together a slide to really explain the data, right? And really it was impactful. It landed, right? And put together a recommendation. Now our UX team said, well, wait a minute, this is not how we would do it, right? They may or may not have cringed a little bit, right? But that's fine because it exposed the data, right? But they said we do have some other ideas of how we would do this, right? And that's the whole concept, right? I like to call it the stone soup concept. You guys ever heard of the Nordic tale of stone soup? Okay, so this was read to me by my kindergarten teacher, and I never forgot this. And I've done some homework on it, and I'm probably butchering it a little bit, but that's okay, right? Basically, the tale goes, and this is common in Nordic countries or Scandinavian countries. There's a traveler walking to town, has nothing, and picks up a rock and knocks on the first door and says, "Hey, if you put on some boiling water, I'll make you the best soup you ever had." Right? So person puts on some boiling water, and the traveler throws the rock in the water. This is a rock in water, right? So they test it and they say, any carrots? Chuck, you got some carrots? Just a couple carrots make this better. So Chuck throws in some carrots. Taste it again, right? This is a rock, water, and carrots. Taste it again. Nick, do you got any celery? Celery might really help as well. The way, I think in the U.S., our culture sees this person as a swindler, right? In the the way that the tale is told in the Nordics, the community made the soup. They made it together, right? And frequently there's like a military bend to it. These were like foreign military men or something, right? But it's the same concept because the rock is the data and the boiling water is how we evangelize it, which for us is good storytelling in slideware, right? And then the community makes it. I'm not a UX expert, right? I don't think anybody wants me on the product team, right? Okay. But if we can bring an idea to highlight this, to bring it alive, right? That has meaning because the UX team has something that they understand, something they can react to. And in this case, that really worked. They said, oh my gosh, we wouldn't do it this way, but we would do it like this. And that tested really well. That was millions, right? And I don't want to say which company, because some of these companies, millions is a lot and some it's not, that's meaningful. And I will say, we were talking earlier about this whole idea of like analytics as a conveyor belt, and how do we design a process to regularly combine the data with our expertise and tell a story, right? There are, with Gen AI, there are a lot of interesting use cases now to regularly do that, right? So there's a startup out of Carnegie Mellon. Right now, their name is AB Hero, abhero.ai, but they're going to change the name to SiteWiz or something like that. But what they do is they analyze your site, and AI comes in with testing suggestions. And next month, they're adding a element where they ingest your data, the same as some of these other companies would. And so it'd be very targeted to actual behaviors on your site and finding an insight. They're applying machine learning models to that data behind the scenes, and then Gen AI takes it from there. So it's an interesting connection because Gen AI doesn't technically understand these things. The way they've set it up, it kind of does. And so they're very close within a couple months to where they hit your data. Hey, there's something statistically valid here, right? Here's a Gen AI use case, and hit a button and you can test it in our tool. That's value from data and analytics, right? That's your conveyor belt. So how interesting is that? And hopefully as we start to run low on ideas, which hopefully we do, right? Hopefully we every time we have a new analyst, we come in, we get a bunch of ideas, we're in the queue, and we start to run low on ideas. Something like AB Hero or SiteWiz, whatever they're going to call it, can really help you ingest your data, come up with ideas, and test them quickly and show value today.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I'm going to look into that because that's a very interesting thing that you kind of just brought up. And from a mentality standpoint, we've definitely seen in the past, like, simulate your, click this button, simulate your tests, and we'll be able to understand what is going to happen. But I'm very curious how they're approaching it with Gen AI there. That's very cool. Very, very cool. But one of the things you said, and I've been hung up on it. You had it 4 or 5 minutes ago, but you mentioned selection bias, and that was something that really resonates with me because one of my favorite stories of all time, especially when I was going through Home Depot, but one of my favorite stories of all time was hearing that the ratings and reviews was driving so much conversion, because if a user were to interact with ratings and reviews, then you would end up driving more conversion. Okay, yeah, 100%. But why are they interacting with ratings and reviews in the first place? It's because of product demand. So you have to have product demand first to then say, maybe I need to go figure out if ratings and reviews are important for me to assess. Because now I might need to actually figure out, is this actually a good product? Because it's got my attention up top, but has it gotten my commitment down below? Rather than the opposite approach, which is what was trying to be sold as the story to us, was, hey, we need to bring ratings and reviews to the top because ratings and reviews, if people interact with it, they tend to buy it. That is fundamentally flawed. You need to make sure that you're approaching this from a standpoint of understanding the way your users are thinking about it, because that selection bias, being able to say that the interaction is what's causing the increased conversion rather than the interest in the product itself, that then goes into ratings and reviews. that disconnection existed in a big way in the specific project that I'm talking about. And, it was one of those situations where you go in, you build a hypothesis, you say you're going to get a bunch more revenue, and then revenue drops. It was one of those situations. And it's because fundamentally we did not actually do that. Obviously that A/B test failed and we didn't move forward with it. So nothing happened. But, inside that mentality, I feel like that's where a lot of people get hung up. They read the story in reverse. Like it's almost like I'm trying to force an analogy here, but it's like they start with the carrots and end with the stone instead of start with the stone and end with the carrots, right? But that's the kind of stuff that really resonates with me when you start talking about that data story. And you were talking about a card example of it, but this one very similar. So
That is an interesting take on it. I've been saying it, I've been wrestling with the same thing, and I think I've maybe struggled to put words to it because we want to be respectful of all viewpoints. And maybe the real win is in bringing people to the table who are a little more liberal in how they interpret data, and people a little more conservative in how they interpret data and statistics, right? But something always bothered me in stats. We so frequently say, well, correlation isn't causation. You always see that in business, right? Or, well, that's a selection bias. The people who are going to click the blue button were more likely to click any button or whatever it is, right? I don't think those are project enders because we act like they are so frequently in business, and they're not. They're the start, they're clarifications, and I would argue too, 90% of folks don't click it. You're telling me by focusing on it a little bit, I can't get a few over the line. What's the value of another couple percent? Probably a lot, one of the retailers I worked at, we were looking at like a wish list feature, and one of the analysts said, hey, 4% of folks that ever get to the site interact with this. But how many units was it? It was like 18 million units a year were added. If you can get 1% more of those to cart or something like that, right? So I think there's different ways of thinking. And I think this is where you get to the beauty of the program, and something we're proud of that we build of, sometimes we want to be very statistically formal. And sometimes we may want to be able to relax that a little bit to clear the path for ideas. If you have the right testing program, sometimes there's a low cost to test, and you can try these things, and some of those more Hail Mary hypotheses turn out okay, right? I've been on both sides where we statistically validate everything, and where we treat it as a dartboard and just see where we can get the value. Try hopefully we balance the program pretty well.
what's more fun?
What's more fun? The middle.
Yeah.
I always say, like, hey, I don't. I think one of the things that I really bring to the table is the ability to execute quickly in this space, right? Not always pretty. I'm sure there's better analysts out there. I'm sure there's far better people at personalization and testing, but we can move fast. And being that person in the middle to be able to be tactful and bring different types of folks together and different ideas. Like I said, how do you merge data with expert opinion with what your customers want? That's where personalization becomes the most fun, right? It is a thought project every day that has a beneficial outcome for everybody.
So we're throwing darts at a spreadsheet instead of a storyboard. Got it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what I would. You might be concentrating on the wrong part of the story, but something like that. I don't know.
That's funny. So now, while you were at Gap, I saw something that you found and tested insights that resulted in $100 million in incremental revenue. Is that something you can talk about? Can you tell us how you were able to accomplish that, and what opportunities did you uncover?
No, it was that's. I don't want to speak to the culture there too much. I want to say I love everywhere that I've worked. I've worked in a lot of great places. Gap's just a little more private than some of the other companies in terms of what they allow to be stated or not stated. But essentially internally, Gap is very, very good at getting an actual tangible revenue output from everything they do. Right. The first thing they lead with, you need an actionable statement with the value that it's going to drive. And that's your goal. Right. And the way they did goals from individual up to, the mega team level, right. The EVP level, and how they were all tied to actual outcomes. That is something they do immensely well. right, immensely well. And so our goal was 100 million, right? And so we may or may not have sometimes been throwing everything at the the dartboard there. We don't say we get tested, but yeah, I do speak very highly of Gap, particularly in that sense. But they are a little more locked down with what you can say. They're
Gotcha.
pretty strict about it.
So, what companies out there do you believe are nailing it when it comes to delivering these amazing online frictionless experiences, like where you can see their online journeys constantly evolving alongside consumers? What are some examples that come to mind?
Yeah. There's a couple. So as much as I hate to say it's paradoxical, I'm probably not the best person to ask that. I don't shop online a ton. I do think Amazon has nailed it really well, and I think a lot of the news services, like Yahoo, seems to know exactly what I'm thinking when I'm thinking about it, right? And so the things that I like to read are always front and center, always sent to me, and mixed up really well. So um, in terms of retail, I would probably lean towards Amazon. So I don't have a more impactful answer for you there, guys. I got asked that the other day in the middle of a meeting. I didn't have a great answer either. Kendra Scott is on the journey to doing something very unique, though, that I haven't, we haven't done it yet, but our 24 roadmap will be very focused on what we think personalization is, and we're very excited about it.
We may have to have you back as the first repeat guest to hear about it a year from now after you've done it and seen the results.
I hope so. We're excited. And I have to say, a lot of companies give lip service to their values. Kendra Scott's for real. And I'm surprised. I went through this interview process, and they have an SVP of culture, and I was, blown away by this, right? And to me, those things were red flags. Like, oh my gosh, what's going on there, right? When I got on the inside, you see that it's for real, right? I mean, so they have this culture of philanthropy, right, and fashion, right, and they have values, and they uphold those. They do group volunteering, right? Kendra herself is out there actively making an impact in the lives of folks through the foundation she's involved with, right? Um, the 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 people to work with internally, like, they work really hard. They're very culture sensitive. Everybody's fun to work with. I don't sense friction there. I don't sense people I don't want to work with, right? And so I have to give Kendra Scott kudos, right? I mean, we were growing hand over foot, and the values come through in everything we do. It's good product, so it is a very pleasant, surprising experience.
So, working at Kendra Scott has been a frictionless experience for you.
I would say
So,
so, yeah.
somebody had to make the joke. Somebody did.
Sorry,
I walked into that one, Chuck.
you did, or set it up. You might depend on how you think about it.
Yeah. I guess we didn't discuss that one though.
So, Jared, what do people get wrong about driving frictionless digital experience? What's a widely held belief about digital experience that you just fundamentally disagree with?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we touched on them, but I think if you start talking about personalization and you start with platform or data, I think you're looking the wrong direction. I think if you get too caught in the statistics, um, it could be a problem. I mean, we can really ideate good experiences that connect our brand to our customers with very little data, and you can execute that with modern abilities, and that's not a shot at, I mean, I'm constantly humbled by the intelligence of and abilities of people out there, far more than mine, right? It's more that it's okay to start, embrace where you're at and start there and do something today to drive value while you're starting to look to the future, right? To the large scale engineering and having lots and lots of data and all these things, right? And so that's our 70% of our focus this year will be execution. We have things in front of us today. We have people visiting us today. They do leave a data footprint, and we have some of it. And how can we envision, through data and good hypothesis and good narrative building experiences for them, test them through a solid program, and hopefully get to what we call personalization. right? But we want about 20% of our focus on what does that big future look like? How do we start to move in that direction? We're not doing it first, we're doing it second. We're driving value first and thinking about our customers and the experience first. Then we're thinking about how we do it in the future. And we're going to innovate too, and I say this, I don't want to be offensive when I say this either, but we don't have to solve the problems on Earth before we go to Mars, right? We can think big, we can take that swing, and we will.
There's some you have some great expressions that will definitely probably end up in show notes. So, besides subscribing to and listening to every episode of the Frictionless Experience podcast, how do you keep up with the industry and digital transformation?
I am a LinkedIn junkie. I don't even have Instagram. I did not like their personalization, what it was showing to me. You click one thing on Instagram, is all you see, Um, you know, um, don't have Instagram, Facebook only for the HOA group, which I'm the, the president of. You guys were there for the stories earlier. And it's really I like LinkedIn a lot because somebody writes a book, they're going to talk about it on there. Then I'm going to buy it on Amazon, right? Amazon will price adjust it to me before I search it. The you get to see thought leaders what they're saying about these things, right? And so I'm constantly then reading and following links and things, and then I keep. I try to organize my week into like themes. So like Friday is like coffee chats. And so I may be connecting with a leader another company or a vendor or somebody trying to sell something to me because you start to connect. What are people doing? How are they doing it? I'm starting to get closer to being an advisor to some startups and things. So that's how I do it.
What are 2 to 3 final recommendations for listeners that they should apply in their own roles to drive more frictionless digital experiences using personalization analytics?
I would say keep it simple, right? I think people every company you talk to, they say we're our data is not that good. We don't really personalize that well. Everybody says that. And in fact, one company from my past, one of the larger ones, they had someone that led this and said, "Oh my gosh, the only eyesore on my team is personalization." Right? So I think you have to embrace. It's just like we would do as individuals. You have to embrace who you are and what you have and work with that. Right? And so you have a certain amount of data. You probably have some sort of executional ability to get deploy experiences to the website or to however you're going to do this. Can you take that data and get the right people, the right experts in the room and come up with some ideas, ideate some things, get some hypotheses and try them and test them. And I think that leads into the second one is, if you have a robust enough testing program, this doesn't have to be complicated either. You don't need a PhD in statistics on the team. In fact, you need very little. A tool like Monotate enables regular people like us who don't know, aren't PhDs in statistics, and we're not experts at JavaScript to be able to deploy an experience and use it and read results, right? So if you have the ability to say when do we need rigor and when can we go a little faster, you can start to try these ideas and maybe you get something that gets to personal being personalized, right?
That's great.
I
I
don't know if
love
those are
the
recommendations or if I'm standing on a soapbox, but that's
yeah.
how I do it.
No, those are great. And what I love about the first one was what you're saying. What came to mind was basically don't let what you don't have block you from using what you do have to go get value out of it. Sometimes we get so focused on what we lack that we don't actually take the initiative to use what we have. So
Right. You have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. It's worth a couple cliche stories if you guys don't mind. Um, I remember when I was in middle school, we had this person in the school who was just um, all he wanted to do was play football. That's all he wanted to do. And he would even going up the stairs, he would like you ever see the football players where they're doing the feet, in the tires or something? He would do that on the stairs. He's the only one of us that played college football because he took where he was and he worked really hard. Right? He didn't say I'm not the biggest guy. I remember seeing him on the kickoffs running down, and the bigger guy knocked him down every single time. And he got back up. He's the only one of us who played college football. And I think that there, perhaps some advice too is, I think that we have to be humble enough to um, let our guard down a little bit and not necessarily have to put a stake in the ground on everything. That has worked really, really well for me. And I do have some cliche stories that would help me, that would support that, but I don't know if we have to go into them or not.
It's a great story on perseverance, though. I mean, that's what it's about.
Well, thanks for a great conversation, Jared. Where can listeners find you and connect with you?
LinkedIn. There's no better place.
All right. So LinkedIn it is. We'll be sure to include a bio or a link to your LinkedIn. I'll try that again. We'll be sure to include a link in the show notes to your LinkedIn profile.
Jared.miller at kendrascott.com as well, if you want to email me.
Excellent. Well, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Frictionless Experience podcast. Remember to follow us on your favorite podcast player app so you automatically receive notifications when we upload new episodes, and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Let us know what you think and what topics you want us to cover in future episodes. We'd be happy to cover anything that might be causing you friction. And of course, you can find and connect with me and Nick. Try it again. And of course, you can find and connect with me and Nick on LinkedIn.